Hello, everyone. Today is Thursday, December 24th, 2020. Happy Christmas Eve. We got the video coming out earlier today. Markets are closed tomorrow, half day today. So I figured I would fire out a shorthand version of this week's stock market recap. So happy early holidays. Let's sort of dive right into our market analysis from the week. A couple of the big headlines that stand out. Small caps really seeing some sharp outperformance today, or this week, I should say, on a relative basis. Financials being the big kind of leader or factor in that. And the dollar actually had dollar index. So the basket dollar against basket of currencies actually had an up week, inside week. We'll talk about that a little bit later in this video as well. If we look at performance, it was pretty flat across the board. As mentioned, the Russell 2000 was the standout. It was the one thing we can sort of look and kind of hang our hat on in terms of performance. It was up 1.58%. Everything else was basically flat to slightly negative here. You can see world stocks down the greatest at minus 0.68%. If we look at market internals from the week, so this view, because we're recording this Thursday, we've got actually last Friday's data in here. So the week totals aren't quite the week. They are the week plus last Friday. But regardless, you can see still positive across the board here. A number of stocks hitting new 52-week highs continue to outpace those hitting new lows. This is our sort of our favorite view at depicting that relationship here. And you can see just over the past 30 days, if you sum everything up day after day, you've got this nice, strong uptrend expansion in the number of stocks hitting 52-week highs, and that there is bullish. Now, if we look at sector performance, you can actually see that we were mostly negative here across the board. Now, one thing is, when we're looking at these numbers, because I'm pulling in this data and sort of crunching this myself, things can be a little off here in terms of the because of the holiday shortened week and when I'm pulling this data. So just keep in mind this might not be exact percentages here, but they're going to be pretty close. Regardless, you see financials and tech were the two big standouts here, and pretty much everything else had a tough time. Energy was at the bottom of the list, followed by discretionary and communication services. If we look at volatility, basically no change here. It's kind of right on pace to where we have been and where we were last week. And if we look at interest rates, you can see yields fell just a little bit. So bond prices moving up and investment grade bonds, high yield bonds there by the LQD and JNK ETFs were up on the week. If we look at dollar and commodities here, you can see the dollar index was higher, as we mentioned at the top of the video. It's not something you see every week. It was still weekly so, and that trend is still very much to the downside, but a little bit of a breather there for any dollar holders. And gold, silver flat, Bitcoin flat, DBA up nicely, 1.41%. Crude oil was down. Natural gas having a tough time here, minus 5.38%. So if we put it all together, we look at the report card. We've got an A- for this week's performance. So pretty strong remarks across. Of course, it was lighter volume and it was only 3.5 days worth of trading, but all things considered, things still looking pretty good for this uptrend. If we look at how we're positioned here with our two trading systems, Merlin at the top, basically no change. We're still 87% invested in this market, so essentially riding the uptrend in stocks, participating in this move up. And Lamerick, which is our shorter term tactical swing trading system, has been mostly hovering around kind of neutral on this market in the short term, but it is and finds itself going into Monday tilted to the long side, 46% invested across 6 positions. So that is it for part 1. We'll be back just a moment with some charts. All right, we're back here. We've got TC 2000 open. This is our equity market grid. So you're looking at the S&P 500 in the top left, Nasdaq top right, Russell bottom left, and ACWX, which is our international ETF, so international stocks minus the United States, in the bottom right. Price itself is the white dashed lines you see on all these charts, and the multicolored dots are a custom smart trend filter indicator. It measures price, volume, and time and helps us determine trend strength, and sort of path of least resistance. So we're looking at a weekly time frame on this view right now, and the one interesting thing you'll note is that the S&P 500 top left is actually now starting to print a neutral trend filter reading here. So it's been downgraded this week. I think that's interesting. It's notable. It hasn't happened too often. I mean, I guess back in October, late October, early November, we had a couple of yellow prints in here. They ended up resolving to the upside. The way we like to usually think about this analysis here, or this specific indicator, is that we give the benefit of the doubt to the prior signal. In this case, it is a bull green signal. So benefit of the doubt to the buyers. However, it is notable there that we're starting to weaken up just a smidge in the S&P 500. Nasdaq still bullish, Russell's bullish, ACWX still bullish. Now, if we go down to a daily time frame on all these markets, you can see there's a little more indecision, although most of it was resolved by the end of the week. So the S&P 500 here had a bunch of neutral prints earlier this week and last week, but all of them have been resolved now back to the bull side. Same thing with the Nasdaq early this week. We had some neutrals. They went bullish. IWM just has been coasting higher, totally uninterrupted. You can see ACWX here also seeing a little turbulence. So a little bit of some mixed signals you're finally starting to see in here. Just really more just weakening of the uptrend. So that's notable. It's new. It's different. Let's continue to pay attention to that and monitor it. Now, if we look at just the price action of these specific markets, you can see here lots of lines going on from our past analysis. But essentially what we talked about in our last video was this channel that the S&P 500 had been rising in. And we also have all these horizontal levels that we think are important. So when we zoom in and look at the action here, you can see it's just riding and just kind of grinding on this lower trend line, the lower end of this channel. And it is back below this 3,700 level, which is where we topped out in early December. So it's interesting here. Again, this kind of coincides with some of the little, weakness that we're starting to see creep in here for the S&P 500. Nothing is broken down. There's no major technical damage. It's simply slowing of momentum and more of a sideways kind of grind versus, just up. So, let's pay attention to this as we go into the end of the year. Again, expect volume to be pretty light. If we start breaking this lower channel, if we start breaking below 3640 or so, that'll start to give us some technical damage. And if you're tactical, if you're short term, maybe that's where you're starting to strike on some of those short sales. Now, that's the S&P 500. If we look at the Russell 2000, it's a much different story here. Basically, we're still, pushing higher here and just resolving ranges, and all dips are being met with, basically buying pressure, and we continue to float higher here. So we are, extended on virtually all metrics, but as we know, that doesn't necessarily warrant a sell signal in itself. So the Russell continues to be kind of the strongest of the bunch right now. If we were to throw on some key levels, I would say, certainly, I guess the way we opened on Monday of this week, so Monday's lows, I think is your good reference point here. You could also use, if you want to get a little bit tighter here, kind of the highs from last Friday. If we start, breaking back below there, you might have a little bit of a short-term signal, but really just depends on how active and tight and close to this action you prefer to be. Last but not least is the Nasdaq 100 here, and you can see that this one did break. So this little rising trend that we talked about here, so this more immediate kind of multi 2-week slope here that we had, we did break that on Monday of this week, and then we just proceeded to go sideways. And again, what I think is interesting here with the Qs in particular is just the back-to-back inside days, basically. So we had this larger range day here on Tuesday. We saw an inside session on Wednesday. We saw an inside session again on Thursday, which of course was a half day. And we see volume was very, very light on these sessions, which makes sense. So this here, I think, is just also kind of at an interesting little compression point, and we can look to this as a breakout coming into next week, either up or down. That might signal the tone starting next week's session. So that's it. That's the roundup there for the major markets. If we take a quick glance at some other things going on, we're going to try and keep this video short. I don't blame you if, well, credit to you if you're watching this now during this period. So I do want to keep it brief. So TLT is also what I want to mention. Let's just go right to some of the individual charts. We're going to skip the trend filter view. TLT. So we've been all over this, kind of talking about how it's getting super tight in here. It's at a decision point. It's at an inflection point, and it's getting there. We said basically going into 2021 is where we expect that resolve to eventually happen, and it still seems like it's about on pace for that. So maybe one more week of very tight action here. You've got very clear support around 155. You've got this declining trend line. You've got a bunch of overlapping inside and just overlapping weeks going on here. And so TLT, I think, is just, again, worth paying attention to. I know it's not super sexy, but the bond market is a big market. It will impact certainly how capital rotates around. So TLT, I think that's interesting. And I did want to just mention on the dollar, UUP, so this is a dollar index, and you can see that again, very much just been an orderly kind of sell off to the downside. We've got an inside week this week, so we finally, kind of broke the pressure. We had an inside week 2 weeks ago, right? So we had this inside week, it resolved lower, and then we went right back to an inside week. So that kind of can tell us here that we're starting to slow down on the selling pressure, so to speak. You can see the divergence that, or the MACD that's trying to race higher here as price falls. So there is some, just some slowing in that selling pressure that's going on. And if the dollar starts to see this move higher, that could be enough to kind of spill over into equity markets and create that sell-off and that bearish break in the short term. Again, all speculation. We have to see if it actually happens right now. All the trends are still in, downtrend for the dollar, uptrend for equities, but you're getting the short-term sort of ingredients here for maybe some mean reversion. So we'll leave it there. That's all we'll cover in this week's video. Again, enjoy the time off away from markets. Enjoy times with friends and family, and we'll be back here next week, as always, tuning in on Wednesdays for our trade ideas, and every Friday for the weekly market analysis. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching every week. Have a great holiday off, and we'll see you back here next week.